She had survived 2 winters alone, buried more than she liked to count, and spent the last of her savings on a single line in a newspaper she would never see printed. Widow plain homestead asks for a husband, honest man preferred, no drinkers. That was all, 11 words in a prayer. For 4 months she watered the same dying garden and read the same 3 letters until the ink went soft. And then, on a Tuesday with no warning at all, a man rode up out of the heat with a scar through his eyebrow, a pistol worn low like he meant it, and a face she had seen, God help her, on a paper nailed outside the marshal's office. She had asked for a husband. What climbed down off that horse looked like a hanging waiting to happen. But here is the thing nobody tells you about judging a man by the dust he arrives in. Sometimes the most dangerous-looking thing on the road is the only thing standing between you and the people who actually want you dead. She just didn't know that yet. She was still standing on her own porch, one hand white-knuckled on the doorframe, the other reaching, without her permission, for the rifle by the door. This is the story of the summer I sent for a husband and got something I had no word for. And of how I learned that the worst-looking man in 3 counties was the only one who never once lied to me. That was the first thing wrong. Old Pike never quit early. He'd bark a stranger halfway back down the road and keep at it long after the man was a smudge on the horizon, just to have the last word. But when the rider came up over the rise that afternoon, Pike took one look, made a low sound in his chest I'd never heard from him, and lay down flat in the dirt with his ears back. I should have trusted the dog. Instead, I trusted the calendar. I've been counting days like a woman counts coins when there aren't enough, turning them over, hopping the number changed if she looked again. The letter had said the 2nd week of June, weather and rail permitting. It was the 2nd week of June. The wheat, such as it was, had come up thin and yellow, the well was down to a smell of mud, and the note the bank held against the place came due in September whether I had a man's name on the deed or not. So when I saw the horse, my heart did a thing I am not proud of. It lifted. I stood there with my hands still wet from the wash bucket, and I thought, foolish as a girl, he came. He actually came. Then he got close enough to see. I want to be fair to him, even now. I want to set it down honest the way I set down everything, because a ledger you lie to is worse than no ledger at all. So here is honest. The man who rode into my yard that day was not what the catalogue of my imagination had drawn. I had pictured someone soft around the middle and apologetic around the eyes. A clerk, maybe, or a farmer gone widower himself, a man who'd lost a wife and a little of his nerve, and wanted a quiet place to set both down. That was the kind of man who answered an advertisement like mine. That was the kind of man who'd settle. This man did not look like he had ever settled anything but an argument. He sat the horse like he'd grown out of it. Long through the legs, wide through the shoulders, dusted gray from hat to boot like the road itself had tried to bury him and given up. His coat was dark and worn at the cuffs, and it hung open enough to show the gun, and the gun was the trouble. It rode low on his right hip, the holster tied down at the thigh with a leather thong, and there is only one reason a man ties his holster down, and it is not for plowing. He had a scar that split his left eyebrow and pulled the corner of his eye down a fraction, so that even resting, his face looked like it was deciding whether to be angry. 2 days of beard, a mouth that didn't seem to know how to make a friendly shape. And under all of it, under the dust and the scar and the set of him, a face I knew. I knew it because I'd seen it 3 weeks before on a paper tacked to the post outside the dry goods store in town, fluttering under a tin advertisement for laudanum and liver pills. I'd stood reading it the way you read those things, half curious, half glad it had nothing to do with you. WANTED. For robbery and the killing of a man at 2 Rivers. The drawing had been crude the way they always are. A hard jaw, a scar. A name I couldn't now recall, but a face I plainly could, because here it was, breathing, 15 feet from my front door, swinging a leg over the saddle and stepping down into my yard like he owned the dirt. I did not decide to say what I said. It came up out of me the way a scream comes up past thought, past manners, past the part of a person that knows better. I asked for a husband, I said, not an outlaw. I heard my own voice crack on the last word. I had a hand on the doorframe. The other had already found the cold barrel of the rifle I kept just inside, and I had it half lifted before I knew I'd reached for it, the stock against my hip, the muzzle pointed somewhere between his belt and the sky because my arms had gone to water. He stopped. He didn't reach for the gun. He didn't even look at it, mine or his. He just stood very still in the middle of my yard with the reins loose in one big scarred hand and the horse blowing dust behind him, and he looked at the rifle, and then he looked at me, and something in his face did a slow, strange thing. It didn't get angry. It got tired, like he'd seen this exact moment from this exact distance more times than a man should have to, and knew already how it usually went. "Ma'am," he said. That was all. One word low, with a kind of grit in it. He didn't raise his hands. He didn't smile to soften me. He didn't tell me to put the rifle down. He just said ma'am and waited, and I have thought a great deal since about how much a man can tell you in the way he chooses not to fill a silence. "Stay where you are," I said. "I am where I am," he said. The horse stamped. A fly landed on my wet wrist, and I couldn't even spare the hand to wave it off. Somewhere out past the barn, a meadowlark was going on like nothing in the world had ever been wrong, and I remember hating it just then, for being so easy in itself when my whole chest had turned to a fist. "You're on a paper in town," I said. "I saw it, 2 Rivers, a man killed." His jaw worked, the scar pulled. "I know what the paper says." "Is it you?" He was quiet a moment. The honest ones, I've learned, are the ones who go quiet before they answer, because they're checking the answer against the truth instead of against what you want to hear. The liars come out fast and smooth. "The face is mine," he said finally. "The rest of it I'd argue if there was anybody left who'd listen." He shifted his weight, slow, telegraphing it the way you move around a spooked animal. "Name's Brennan. I wrote you 4 letters. You wrote me 3. You signed them D. Whitlock, and you said you had 30 acres, a sound barn, a bad well, and no patience for nonsense." Something almost moved at the corner of his hard mouth. I figured the no patience part was the truest thing in any of them. He had me there. I had written that. I'd written it sitting at this table by a tallow candle with my dead husband's coat still hung on the door because I couldn't yet make my hands take it down, and I'd written no patience for nonsense and felt, for 1 minute, like a woman who still had some sand left in her. "Anybody can read a letter," I said. "They can," he agreed. "I didn't read yours, I kept them." He nodded, careful, toward the saddlebag. "Third one's got a tear in the corner. You wrote about the cottonwood by the creek and how your father planted it the year you were born, and you were sorry to think a stranger wouldn't know that about the place. I'm no kind of catch, ma'am, and I won't pretend I am. But I know about the cottonwood. A liar reading you those letters out loud wouldn't have bothered to keep that part." I did not lower the rifle, but I felt it come down a little in my arms, the way a held breath comes down, all on its own. You have to understand how alone I was. I don't say it for pity. I say it because it explains me, and a story without a reason for the people in it is just a string of things happening. My father had died of his chest the winter before last. Tom, my husband, married 11 months, a sweet, useless, gentle man, had gone through the river ice in March of the year past trying to pull a calf out, and the calf had lived and Tom had not, and there is an irony there I have never once found funny. After that it was me and Pike and the bad well and the bank's patient, terrible arithmetic. A woman alone on a frontier homestead is not a romantic thing. She is a target with a roof. The Harlan brothers 2 ridges over had let me know, in the smiling way men do, that they'd be happy to take the worry of the place off my hands for a price that was no price at all. The advertisement was not a search for love. I want that plain. It was a fortress I was trying to build out of the only material I had left, which was the slim legal magic of a husband's name. And what had answered my advertisement was a wanted man. "You'd best water that horse," I heard myself say. I will never fully understand why I said it. I have turned it over in the ledger of myself 100 nights since. The best I can manage is this. A liar would have argued harder. A liar would have been charming. This man had given me the worst possible version of himself, the face is mine, and offered me a torn letter as his only defense, and there is a kind of trust that gets built faster by what a person refuses to hide than by anything they say. He watered the horse, I kept the rifle. He didn't come in the house. He didn't ask to. He led the gelding to the trough, and when the trough proved near dry, he found the bucket and worked the bad pump without a word of complaint, with the patient mean strength it took, until enough muddy water came up to do. He rubbed the horse down with a twist of grass. He checked its feet. The whole time Pike watched him from the dirt with that lowered, considering look, and I noticed, I am a noticer. It's my curse and my one talent, that the man never once raised a hand or a voice to the animal, and that by the time the sun started to go orange Pike had got up and gone to lie in the man's shade instead of mine. A dog is not a character witness, but a dog is not a fool either. "There's a lean-to off the barn," I told him, through the window. The rifle now stood in the corner where I could reach it. "It's dry. You can have it. Tonight only. In the morning we'll talk about what's to be done, because I'll tell you now, Mr. Brennan, I don't see how a woman puts a wanted man's name on a deed and keeps the deed, or her neck." "No," he said, "neither do I." He hung the bridle on a nail like he'd hung it there 1,000 times. "I didn't come expecting you'd want me once you saw me. I came because I gave my word I would, and I've got little enough left that's worth anything, but my word's still in the drawer." He looked at me through the window, and the orange light caught the scar and made it look, for once, less like a threat and more like an old hurt. "I'll be gone by noon if you want it. I'd ask one thing first." "Ask." "That advertisement, no drinkers." A pause. "Why that particular? You could have asked for 100 things, money, land of his own. You asked for a man who didn't drink." It was none of his business. It was the most his business thing in the world, given what I'd nearly done to him with the rifle. "My husband didn't drink," I said. "My father did." And I shut the window before my face could do anything I'd have to account for later. I did not sleep. I sat up at the table with the candle and the rifle and the 3 letters I'd kept of his, and for the first time I read them not as a desperate woman counting days, but as a person trying to find the seam in a thing. And the trouble was, there wasn't one. The letters were short and plain and honest to the point of being no help to himself at all. He'd told me he'd been a soldier and then a man who hired his gun for cattle outfits, which was not a thing to brag of, and he hadn't bragged. He'd told me he was 34 and tired of it. He'd said, and I'd thought it a strange thing to put in a letter to a stranger, and I thought it stranger now, "I'm not looking to be loved, Mrs. Whitlock. I'm looking to be useful to somebody before I'm done. There's a difference, and I expect you know it." I'd known it. That line was half the reason I'd written back. Out in the barn lean-to, a light moved once low and went out. The man did not come to the house. He did not test the door. Somewhere past midnight I heard him talking low, even, and I went cold and crept to the window with the rifle, certain there were others, certain I'd been a fool, and there was no one. He was talking to the horse. Just the horse. A low running murmur of a man who'd spent too long alone telling the only thing that would listen about the long road he'd come up. I went back to the table and I did a thing I had not done since Tom went through the ice. I put my face in my hands and I let myself, for about the length of a burning match, simply be afraid out loud, where no one could see. Then I wiped my face and I trimmed the candle and I opened the ledger to a fresh page, because that is what I do with the things too big to hold. I write them down small enough to carry. At the top I wrote the date. Below it I wrote, "A man came. He is the worst-looking thing I have ever let in the yard." And below that, because honesty in a ledger is the whole point of a ledger, I made myself write the second true thing, the one I didn't want. He never once lied to me. He was up before me, which I would not have believed possible, as I rose with the birds. By the time I came out into the cold blue of the early light, He had already done a thing that stopped me dead on the porch step. The well. The well had been failing 2 years. Tom had meant to dig it deeper, and then Tom had gone, and after that I had simply learned to live with mud and the smell of it, because there are some jobs a woman cannot do alone, and digging out a 15-foot well in caving sand is one of them. I'd made my peace with hauling from the creek, half a mile each way, every day, summer and ice. He was down in it. I could see the rope and the dirt coming up in the bucket, load after load, and hear him down in the dark working with a steady grunting rhythm. And beside the well mouth was a growing heap of wet sand and an old cracked section of cribbing he'd already pulled and meant, I supposed, to replace. He'd found my father's tools in the barn. He'd found the rotted timber and the good. He had, without being asked, without a word, climbed down into the one hole on this place that frightened me most, and gone to work on it in the dark before dawn like a man paying a debt. He was the only one who remembered. I stood on the step a long while and watched the dirt come up. "Mr. Brennan," I said at last. The bucket stopped. After a moment his voice came up out of the ground, dust-roughened, oddly gentle for coming out of a hole. "Ma'am, hope I didn't presume, couldn't sleep. A bad well's an easy thing to fix and a hard thing to look at." A pause. "I'll fill it back in if you'd rather it the way it was." "Don't you dare," I said, and my voice cracked again, twice in 2 days after 2 years of not cracking at all, and I was furious with it and could not stop it. There is a particular cruelty in kindness when you have gone a long time without it. It does not soothe you. It undoes you. I had braced my whole self against threat, against the Harlans, against the bank, against the long arithmetic of being alone, and I had built that bracing strong, and I had needed it. And then a wanted man with a killing on a paper had climbed down a well I was afraid of and started, quietly, without permission, to fix the thing I couldn't. And it nearly took me apart. I went and made coffee. It was all I could think to do with my hands. When he came up out of the well, he was filthy to the waist and there was sand in the scar, and he stood blinking in the new light like something pulled out of the earth, and I handed him the cup without meeting his eye, and he took it without a word, and we stood in the cold blue morning, the two of us, not talking, while the first real sun came up over the ridge and turned the muddy water in the bucket to a thing that almost looked like gold. That was the morning. I did not send him away at noon. I told myself it was practical. The well, the September note, the Harlans. A name on a deed, even a bad name, even a wanted name, was a name, and the law in our territory was 100 miles of bad road away and slow as a dying season, and a woman does what she must. That's what I wrote in the ledger that night. Kept him. Practical reasons. I underlined practical twice, hard enough to tear the page. I have looked at that page many times since. The torn line, the 2 angry underscores, a woman insisting to her own ledger in the dark that her reasons were practical. I think the dog knew better. I think the dog had known since the rise. What I did not know yet, what neither of us knew, sitting easy for the first time over a second cup of coffee, while the repaired well filled clean below us, was that the paper in town had been seen by other eyes than mine. That a man does not get put on a paper for a killing he'll argue without somebody somewhere, wanting very badly for that paper to be believed. That the real danger to me that summer had never been the scarred man in my yard. The Harlans came first, which I should have expected, because trouble that lives close always arrives before trouble that travels. It was the 4th morning. Cole, I had begun, against my own better sense, to think of him as Cole, was up on the barn roof replacing shakes that had gone soft, and I was in the garden coaxing the half-dead beans to believe in the new well water, when I heard the horses. 2 of them, coming up the road at the unhurried walk of men who want you to watch them arrive. I knew the sound the way you know a particular cough in the next room. Vance Harlan and his brother Ezra. They came once a month like a fever, and they always came smiling. "Mrs. Whitlock," Vance called, lifting his hat with a courtesy that had teeth in it. "Heard you took on a hand. Generous of you, what with the well and all." He let his eyes go up to the roof, slow, and find coal, and stop there. Though I'd have thought a woman in your circumstance would be careful who she lets sleep on her land. I did not stop working the beans. I had learned with the Harlans that to stop was to give them something. My circumstance is my own, Mr. Harlan. Course it is, course it is. He walked his horse a few steps closer, casual, putting himself between me and the gate the way a man does when he wants you to feel the size of him. Only there's been talk in town. A paper outside the marshal's, 2 Rivers business. He smiled wider. Funny thing, a wanted man turning up to court a widow. Folks might wonder what a fella like that's after. Land, maybe. Or maybe he just needs a quiet hole to lie low in, and a lonely woman's an easy lock to pick. He shook his head, all false sorrow. I'd hate to see you hurt, ma'am. We've always wanted what's best for you, which is why our offer stands. 600 for the place, the worry off your hands, and you on the next coach to your people back east. Clean. I had no people back east. He knew it. The offer was a coffin with a ribbon on it. I straightened up. I had dirt to the elbows and my hat had slipped, and I was, I am sure, not a figure to frighten anyone. The place isn't for sale, I said. It wasn't last month and it won't be next month. September's coming, Ezra said. It was the only thing he said. He had a way of saying the one thing that mattered and letting it sit. September. The bank note. They knew about the note because everyone in a small place knows everyone's arithmetic, and they were counting my days the same as I was, and waiting at the bottom of the column for the moment the sum came out in their favor. Up on the roof, Cole had stopped working. He hadn't stood, hadn't reached for anything, hadn't said a word. He was simply sitting up there with a shake in one hand and a hammer in the other, looking down at the Harlans with the same tired, level attention he'd given my rifle the first day. And I watched something happen that I have thought about many times since. I watched 2 grown men, 2 men who carried themselves through this country like they owned the weather, get quieter the longer Cole looked at them. Vance's smile stayed, but it cost him more to hold it. Ezra's horse felt the change in his hands and sidestepped. We'll be going, Vance said to me, not to the roof. You think on it. A woman's protection in this country is a fragile thing. He touched his hat again. Wouldn't want anything to happen to that pretty new well. They rode out the way they'd come, slow, watched the whole way by a dog who never once barked, which somehow was worse than if he had. Cole came down off the roof. He didn't ask who they were. He'd heard enough. Those the ones, he said. It wasn't a question. The ones the advertisement was really about. I hadn't told him that. I hadn't told anyone that. The advertisement was about September, I said, and a name on a deed. It was about them. He set the hammer down on the porch rail, gentle, the way he set everything down. You don't ask for no drinkers and no nonsense and a sound man because you're lonesome, ma'am. You ask for a wall. They're why you wanted a wall. He looked at the road where the dust was still settling. How long they been at you? Since Tom went through the ice. I heard myself say it flat, the way you can only say the worst things flat. They offered to buy the place before he was a week in the ground. They've been kind about it ever since. Cole was quiet a long moment. The meadowlark started up again, that same easy song from the first day, and I had stopped hatting it by then. I'd begun, strangely, to take it as a kind of company. Then we'd best get your beans to live, he said, and the wheat. And we'd best go to town and see the marshal about that paper, because the day those 2 find out the law might actually want me, they'll figure they can run me off and take you down to nothing with no man left to argue. Right now they're guessing. Guessing makes a man careful. He picked the hammer back up. We'll fix that later. Beans now. That was Cole entire in those 3 sentences. We. He'd said we and not noticed he'd said it, and I had noticed, the way I notice everything, and I went back to the garden so he wouldn't see my face. He had been telling the truth about 2 Rivers. I want to set down what he told me, because I made him tell me, and because I have learned that the shape of a man is mostly in the parts of his story he doesn't try to make pretty. It came out over 3 nights, in pieces, the way real telling does, not a confession poured out all at once, but a thing dragged into the light a little at a time and looked at and put down again. He had hired on 2 years back to a cattle outfit run by a man named August Reed. Reed paid well and asked few questions, and Cole, who had been a soldier and then a long time at loose ends and was tired in the particular way that makes a man stop asking questions himself, had taken the work and not looked hard at it. The looking hard came later. It came when he understood that Reed's outfit was not so much running cattle as taking them from small holders, from homesteaders, from exactly the kind of people I was. They'd ride in smiling. They'd make an offer, and when the offer was refused, cattle would go missing, fences would burn, wells would foul, and the offer would come again, lower, until the holder broke and sold and moved on, grateful to escape with a wagon and their lives. "It's a trade," Cole said, the third night. We were on the porch in the dark, and he was turning his hat in his hands the way he did when a thing cost him. "There's men who have made it a trade. Reed's one. You don't need a gun if you can make a man too afraid to stay. The Harlans are running the small version of it on you. Reed runs the big version, county-wide, and he runs it patient, and he's good at it. And for the better part of a year I rode for him and told myself I was just a hired hand, and the offers were honest, and what folks did after wasn't my business." "What changed it?" I said. His hands went still on the hat. "There was a place at 2 Rivers," he said. "A man named Caleb Shaw, his wife, 2 little ones, wouldn't sell. Reed's patience ran out faster than usual. There was rail money coming. The land mattered more than most. He sent 4 of us in at night to fire the barn, just the barn, scare them. That was the order." A long breath. "Shaw came out with a shotgun. Course he did. It was his barn, his children asleep in the house 40 feet from the flames. He came out and there was shooting, and when it was done Shaw was dead in his own yard with a gun in his hands, and one of Reed's men, a kid named Tully, dead beside him." The hat turned once. "I didn't fire the shot that killed Shaw. I'll go to my grave saying it, and it's true. But I was there. I was there, ma'am, with a gun on my hip, riding for the man who sent us, and a man died in front of his children because I'd spent a year telling myself the offers were honest. So when they put a paper out, Reed's doing, Reed's money, Reed needing a name that wasn't his on that killing so the rail people wouldn't smell him, and the name they chose was mine because I'd already ridden out on him, and a wanted dead man tells no tales." He shrugged. The most terrible small shrug I ever saw. "The face on the paper's mine. The killing's not. But I earned a place on a paper somewhere. That's the part I won't argue." The candle had burned low inside. Out in the dark, the new well dripped clean and steady into the night. I sat with it a long time. Here, I thought, is the morally heavy thing the whole story had been walking toward. Because I had a choice in front of me, plain as the dark, and it was not the choice I'd thought I was making when I placed an advertisement for a wall. I could send him to the marshal. The true story told plain might clear him, or it might hang him, because the law is 100 miles of bad road and a crude drawing and a dead man's name. And I was there but didn't fire is a thread to hang from, not a rope to climb. Or I could keep his secret. Keep him, and in keeping him bind my own neck and my own name to a wanted man and a story no court had heard, and trust, what? A dog's good opinion. A repaired well. The way he'd said we and not noticed. "Why'd you write to a widow in Montana?" I asked. "A man running. You could have run farther and quieter." "Because I was done running from," he said. "I wanted to run to something just the once before it caught me. Your advertisement said useful. I read it in a town I won't name, in a paper a week old, and I thought, there's a woman who knows the difference between being loved and being useful, and she's asking for the second thing, which is the only thing I've got left to give." He looked at me in the dark. "I figured you'd take one look at me and turn me off. I came anyway. A man ought to keep one promise clean before the end. I picked yours." I did not write practical in the ledger that night. I wrote, "He told me the truth, and it was worse than the lie I was afraid of, and I am keeping him anyway. God help me. God help us both." The third trouble came on the 5th day, and it was the one I hadn't seen, because I'd been so busy watching the Harlans and the calendar that I'd forgotten Cole had said it himself, that first morning over coffee, without either of us understanding. A man doesn't get put on a paper without somebody wanting it believed. Reed wanted it believed, and Reed had men out making sure of it. I knew at the moment the stranger rode in because he rode in wrong. The Harlans wanted to be watched. This man wanted to be unremarkable, and the wanting showed. He came at the slack part of the afternoon, a lean sandy fellow on a good horse, claiming to be looking for strays and water, and he asked his questions easy and friendly, and they were all the wrong questions. Not whose place is this? Instead, that your hand up there. Been with you long, tall fella, ain't he? That a scar he's got. And his eyes the whole time going to Cole and away, to Cole and away, the way a man's eyes go to a thing he's been paid to find. Pike growled low and didn't stop. I sent the man off with water and the wrong answers. No, just a drifter passing, gone tomorrow, didn't get his name. And I smiled the smile the Harlans had taught me, and I watched him ride out the south road, not the way he'd come, and I felt the whole summer tilt under me like ice giving way. That was Reed's, Cole said quietly. He'd come down off the wheat field and was standing at my shoulder, and he'd seen it all the same as me. Carrick, his name is. Reed's tracker. If Carrick's this far north, Reed knows I went aground in this country, and he's not sending Carrick to bring me to a marshal. He said the next part very plainly, with no fear in it, which frightened me more than fear would have. Reed can't have me telling the Two Rivers story to anybody who'd listen. A dead wanted man's tidy. A talking wanted man's a noose around Reed's own neck. Carrick'll go back, and he'll bring others, and they'll come for me here, and they won't be careful about who's standing next to me when they do. I understood him. I understood all of it at once, the way you understand the depth of water only when you're already in it over your head. By keeping Cole, I had not built a wall. I had painted a target on my own roof. Then you have to go, I said. The words came out of me like teeth pulled. Tonight, before Carrick gets back. If you're gone, there's no reason for them to come here. The Harlans want the land, but they want it cheap. They won't kill for it, not with rail people watching the county. It's only you that brings the killing kind. You go, and I'm just a widow with a deed and a debt again, and that I can survive. I survived it before. I meant it. That is the part I have to set down honest, even now, even knowing what came after. I meant it with my whole self. I had wanted a wall, and I had got, instead, a reason for men to burn my barn with me in it. And the practical thing, the ledger thing, the thing that summed correctly at the bottom of the column, was to send him down the road in the dark and live. He looked at me for a long moment. Is that what you want, he said, or is that the arithmetic? Does it matter? It does to me, he said. It's about all that does anymore. And there it was, the whole heavy heart of the thing, laid out plain on a porch in the failing light. Because the honest answer, and I have only ever kept an honest ledger, was that I did not want him to go. That somewhere in 5 days of repaired wells and we spoken without thinking, and a hard man telling me the worst of himself rather than the best, I had stopped being a woman counting days against a bank note, and started being a woman afraid of a different kind of loss entirely. And that wanting was the most dangerous, most foolish, most expensive thing I had let onto the place yet, more dangerous than the rifle, than the Harlans, than Carrick and all of Reed's men together, because it was the one thing that could make me choose wrong. Go, I said, please, while I can still be sensible about it. He nodded slow. He went to the lean-to. I heard him saddling the gelding in the dark, the small familiar sounds of it, and I stood on the porch with my arms wrapped around myself and Pike pressed against my leg whining low, and I told myself this was the wall holding. This was the advertisement working exactly as it should. This was survival. This was the sum coming out right. The hoofbeats started up, faded down the north road, gone. I went inside and sat at the table and opened the ledger and could not, for the first time in 2 years, make my hand write anything at all. I sat there until the candle guttered. And then, somewhere in the blackest part of the night, Pike's head came up off his paws and his ears went forward, And from down the south road, the road Carrick had taken, the road back, came the sound I had been dreading and not nomming. Horses. More than two. Coming at a trot. Coming with the unhurried confidence of men who know exactly where they're going and what they mean to do when they arrive. Reed's men. Come for a wanted man who was no longer here. Come to a homestead with no wall left on it at all. I did not light the candle again. That was the first clear thought I had, sitting in the dark with the hoofbeats growing. No light. A lit window is a thing to aim at. I'd learned that oddly from Cole, who left no light burning in the lean-to and talked to his horse in the black, a man who'd spent a year on the wrong side of exactly this kind of arrival and knew how it was done. So I sat still and let my eyes go wide in the dark, and I counted, because counting is what I do when the fear comes, and I counted 4 horses. 4. 4 men for one widow and an empty lean-to. Reed was not a careful man for nothing. I want to set down what I did next plainly, because I have heard since that I was brave, and that is not the word. I was not brave. I was a woman with a rifle and 30 acres and no people back east and nothing left to retreat to. And when there is nothing behind you, what looks like courage is only the absence of anywhere to run. I took the rifle. I took the box of shells from the shelf above the stove, the same shelf where Tom's coat had hung until I'd finally, that spring, made my hands take it down. I put out the back, low into the garden, and I lay down in the bean rows between the house and the barn where the new well stood, because if they fired the buildings I wanted dirt under me and the dark at my back, and I waited. The riders came into the yard slow, a man's voice easy carrying, "Brennan, we know you're here. Carrick saw you. No sense in the woman taking your trouble, send her out and we'll talk it square." So that was the shape of it. Reed's men believed Cole was still here. Carrick had reported a tall, scarred man on the Whitlock place and ridden back for the others, and in the hours it took, Cole had gone, and these 4 did not know it. They thought they had him cornered. They thought the widow was a thing to move out of the way. I lay in the beans and understood that my one advantage was a lie I hadn't told. They believed Cole was in that lean-to. As long as they believed it, they would talk before they burned, because a cornered gunman is a thing you talk to carefully, not a thing you rush in the dark. The moment they understood the lean-to was empty, the careful would go out of them and the burning would start, and after the burning there would be no witnesses to a widow who'd seen Reed's men and could name them. The lie was my wall, the only one I had left, and it would hold exactly as long as it took 4 men to grow impatient. "He's not coming out," I called. I made my voice shake. It did not require much pretending. "He's hurt. He took a fall off the barn roof this morning. He can't hardly stand. He's in the lean-to and he can't come out." Silence. A horse stamped. They were thinking. A hurt man was better than a healthy one, easier, and the story fit. A man who'd fall off a roof, and it bought me minutes, and minutes were the only currency I had. "Then we'll come to him," the easy voice said. And a light bloomed, a torch, struck and flaring, and I saw them for the first time. 4 shapes against the orange. One of them swinging down off his horse with the torch held high and walking toward the lean-to where there was nothing to find. And I knew that the instant he pulled that door and found it empty, the whole arithmetic flipped, and I raised the rifle to my cheek in the bean rows and tried to make my watery arms hold a sight on a man by torchlight. And I thought, with a strange, cold clarity, I am about to kill a man or be killed, in my own garden, over a deed and a debt, and a story that happened at 2 rivers to people I never met. The torchman reached the lean-to, put his hand to the door, and a rifle fired from the dark of the north road. Not mine. I hadn't fired. It came from behind the men, from the road Cole had ridden out on hours before, and it took the torch clean out of the man's hand. Not the man, the torch and the flame went into the dirt and guttered, and the yard dropped back to dark. And a voice I knew, flat and tired and carrying like a stone dropped down a well, said, "Brennan's not in the lean-to. Brennan's behind you, and the next one's not the torch." He had not gone. I lay in the beans with my heart slamming and understood it all in a rush. He had ridden out north to draw the trouble off my place, exactly as I'd asked, and then, somewhere down that dark road, he had stopped. He had turned the gelding. He had come back across country in the black and put himself behind the men on the south road, between them and the only retreat they had, because a hard man who'd spent a year learning Reed's trade knew that you do not protect a place by leaving it. You protect it by being the thing the killers have to worry about at their backs. He had come back to be the wall, knowing what it cost. Knowing Reed's men coming for him was the whole reason the danger existed at all. What followed I have never been able to set down as a clean account because it was not clean. It was dark and fast and ugly, and it lasted, I think, less than a minute, though it has lasted my whole life since. There was shooting. There was a horse screaming. There was a man shouting orders that came apart into men shouting nothing. I fired twice into the dark above the muzzle flashes, not because I aimed at anyone, but because 4 guns against 1 needed to become 4 guns against 2, and the not knowing of a second shooter in the beans was worth more than my poor aim. Pike was a snarling shape low between the rider's legs, and a horse went down, and a man went down, and then there were hoofbeats fast, panicked, away, 2 riders breaking south and not looking back, the easy voice gone out of the easy man entirely. And then quiet, the terrible ringing quiet after. Della, Cole's voice from the dark, strained in a way I'd never heard it. Della, you hit. No, my own voice from the beans, very small. No, you. He didn't answer that, which was its own answer. He had been hit through the side, low beneath the ribs. 2 of Reed's men were down and not getting up, and I will not set down the particulars of that, not because I've forgotten them, I have forgotten nothing, but because some things a ledger has no business holding. The other 2 had run. Carrick, I learned later, was one of the runners. And Cole had got himself back up against the barn wall in the dark with his hand pressed to his side, and the blood coming dark between his fingers, and he was trying, the fool, to reload one-handed in case the runners found their nerve and came back. Stop, I said, on my knees in front of him, my hands over his hands. They're gone, stop, let me see. I came back, he said. His voice had gone strange and far away. I got half a mile up the north road and I sat there and I thought, that's the arithmetic riding away, that's the sum coming out right, a breath that caught. And I've spent my whole life doing the arithmetic. Did the arithmetic at 2 rivers. I'm just a hired hand, the offers are honest. What folks do after isn't my business, that's arithmetic, Della. That's how a man rides for August Reed for a year and tells himself he's clean. His hand found my wrist. I didn't want to do the arithmetic one more time, not on you, so I turned around. You absolute fool, I said, and I was crying openly, both hands pressed to his side trying to hold the dark in. You came back. I sent you away to keep you alive, you. I know, he said, almost gentle. I know what you did, that's why I came back. I got him into the house. I will not pretend it was easy or graceful. He was a big man gone heavy, and I was a woman who'd been awake 2 days, and we made it through the door more by his stubbornness than my strength, and I laid him on the bed that had been mine and Tom's, and I cut the shirt away and looked at the wound by candlelight. I lit the candle now. There was no one left to aim at it. And I did the things my mother had taught me a lifetime ago about wounds, packed it and bound it and got the bleeding to slow. And through all of it Cole watched my face instead of the wound. The way a man watches the one thing he wants to take with him wherever he's going. The ball's not in, I told him. It went through, that's good, that's the good kind. If it doesn't fever, my voice gave out. Don't you dare fever. You said that about the well, he said, the ghost of it, don't you dare. And you fix the well. I'll try to fix this too, he said, and his eyes closed, and I sat by him through the longest night of a life that had already held some long ones, with the rifle reloaded by the door and Pike across the threshold and the candle burning low and then lit again. And I did not write a single word in the ledger, because for once in 2 years I was too busy living the day to render it down small enough to carry. He fevered. Of course he fevered. 3 days of it, the wound gone hot and his talk gone wandering. He talked to Tully, the dead kid from 2 Rivers, and he talked to a sergeant from some war. And once, near the worst of it, he talked to me when I was right there holding the cloth to his head, talked to me like I was far off down a road, and said I kept one promise clean, didn't I? I picked yours. And I told him yes, yes, he had, and to hush, and to stay. He stayed. The fever broke on the 4th morning, the way weather breaks all at once, the air gone different before you know why. I had fallen asleep in the chair with my hand on his chest to feel it move, and I woke because it was moving easy, the great laboring heave of the fevered days gone slow and ordinary, and his skin under my hand had gone cool and damp, and his eyes were open and clear and on me. "You're still here," he said, his voice a ruin but his own. "I live here," I said. "Where would I go?" He almost laughed. It cost him, and he didn't care. "The Harlans," he said, because of course the first clear thought of a man like that was the wall, the threat, the we, Reed, Carrick, they'll. "They won't," I said. And here is the part I would not have believed myself, had I not lived it, the ironic turn the whole hard summer took when I'd stopped expecting any mercy from it at all. Because 2 of Reed's men had run from my yard in the dark, and runners talk, and what they had to talk about was a tall, scarred man who'd ambushed them from the road and shot the guns out of their hands and lived, a wanted dead man who would not stay tidy. And one of those runners, it turned out, was a man with less stomach for the trade than Reed had counted on, a man who'd been at 2 Rivers too and had carried it the same as Cole, and who rode not back to Reed but to a territorial marshal 4 days south and told the whole of it, Reed and the rail money and the Shaw barn, and the framing of a man named Brennan, because he was done doing the arithmetic too. It turns out Cole was not the only one. It turns out a man's silence is only ever on loan, and Reed had borrowed too much of it from too many, and it all came due at once. The paper outside the marshal's office came down that autumn. A different paper went up, with a different name on it, and the name was August Reed. I would like to say it was Justice. It was closer to luck wearing Justice's coat. The marshal who came to take Cole's statement made it plain that I was there, but didn't fire was still a thread a man could hang from, and that it was the runner's account, and the rail company's sudden eagerness to be seen on the right side of things, and not any tidy verdict on Cole himself, that kept the rope off him. He was never quite cleared. He was something murkier and more honest than cleared. He was let be. A man the law decided in the end that it had bigger fish to fry than. The Harlans never came up the road again. Whatever they'd heard about the night in my yard, it had cured them of their kindness. And the September note, I will tell you about the September note because it matters, and because it's the truest small thing in the whole account. We did not have the money. The wheat had come in thin as I'd feared, and there was no miracle of harvest, no buried gold in the well. What there was 2 of us instead of 1. Cole healed and he worked. God, how that man worked like a debt he was finally allowed to pay, and a second pair of hands on 30 acres is not a sentiment. It is an arithmetic, the good kind, the kind that adds. We sold the gelding, which near broke his heart, and he never said so. We took on hauling work between us through the late summer, and we made the note, barely, with nothing over. We made it. His name is on the deed now, beside mine. I put it there myself in town, in front of the same clerk who'd nailed up his wanted paper 4 months before, and I watched that clerk's face while I did it, and I found I did not care at all what it did. I am writing this years on. The well still runs clean and cold and deep, the best water in the county, and folks come from 2 ridges over to draw from it now, the same ridges the Harlans used to ride down. The cottonwood my father planted the year I was born is bigger than the house. There are children who climb it. I'll leave the count of them to a more private page than this one. Cole carries the scar through his eyebrow still, and a worse one low on his side that I dressed myself, and he is no longer the worst-looking thing I ever let in the yard, though he was that first day, and I'll never let him forget it, and he wouldn't want me to. I keep the ledger still. It's a different book now, fatter, with weather and prices and births in it, but I kept the old one too in the drawer with his 4 letters and my 3. Sometimes, not often, I take it out and read the page from the first night. A man came. He is the worst-looking thing I have ever let in the yard, and below it, in a hand that was trying not to shake, he never once lied to me. I was right about that. In all the years since, through fever and debt and the long, ordinary weather of a life, he never once lied to me. He'd done a great many things he had to drag into the light and look at, and he did the looking, which is more than most. But he never lied. He gave me the worst of himself in my own front yard with a torn letter for a defense, and asked for nothing, and rode away when I asked him to.